Hello and welcome back to London Cycle Routes. Today I'll be showing you how to cycle from Wanstead in northeast London to Woodford. This ride takes about 20 minutes and you can do the whole thing on quiet streets and protected cycle lanes. By public transport, the same journey takes more like half an hour, so you can even save a bit of time by getting on your bike. If you find this video useful or you just enjoy watching, then please don't forget to hit the subscribe button on the channel, as I try to post new videos just like it every week. I'd also like to say a massive thank you to everybody who supports the channel on Patreon. If you're feeling generous and you'd like to contribute too, then you can find a link in the description below the video. Alright, let's get going. So we're starting on the corner of George Green with Wanstead Tube Station in the background, and we're going to use this little cycle path to get through to Draycott Road. Draycott Road is a cul-de-sac, so it doesn't have any traffic on it, and you should be able to ride down here perfectly comfortably. Our route today is a little bit indirect, as you might have seen from the map at the beginning. You could just cycle dead north up through Wanstead and end up in South Woodford and then Woodford. The reason that we're going this slightly convoluted way is to avoid the busier roads, stick to the back streets, and also benefit from a few protected cycle lanes, which we'll be seeing later. While our way is a little bit indirect, it is still quicker than many of the alternatives, as we also saw at the beginning. And crucially, it's a really nice ride on some pretty quiet streets and decent cycle paths. This route relies on some brilliant brand new infrastructure that's been put in the last few years, but it also links up to some older stuff that has been around for a while but links very nicely to the new stuff. This is one example of it. You can see alongside the A12 here there is a cycle path. The surface is not fantastic and it clearly hasn't been re-tarmacked since it was built, whenever that was, but it's completely separated from traffic, separated from pedestrians, and you'd feel completely happy riding along here with kids. One thing I would say is that it does need a clean, but underneath all that foliage, if it were cleared away, is actually quite a good cycle path. This also connects to an old piece of infrastructure, which is the cycle path under the Green Man interchange. If you couldn't tell from that brickwork, this junction was last rebuilt in the 1990s. Despite overall being a very car-centric scheme that was part of a big road building programme at the time, the designers of this junction did take into account cycle access. We're actually in the middle of a massive roundabout here, in a dip that's only accessible from those underpasses or bridges like this one, which actually runs over the central line of the London Underground. A lot of heavy engineering and money went into providing for cycles there, way more I think than would be available for a scheme that was actually about cycling, ironically. It really just shows the huge budgets that big road schemes like that got back in the 1980s and 90s compared to the amount of money that we're spending on cycle infrastructure now. One thing I would point out is though that at the time that that roundabout interchange was built with its underpasses, it would have been effectively marooned as part of a cycle network. It wouldn't have connected up to anything. It's only recently that it started to connect up to this cycle path, which was put in by Waltham Forest Council relatively recently. This is a shared path, which isn't always a good idea, but I actually think this one is pretty decent for a few reasons. We can go through my shared path checklist. The first is that it does have very low footfall on it, except around this little cabin here where you can buy food and drinks. The second is it has almost no side roads except for that car park that we just went past. And the third is that it's not just a pavement, it is actually separated from the road by a grass verge with a relatively wide path for you to use. The surface of the path is also pretty nice. And I also like the sandy buff colour, which looks nice but also provides a visual clue to pedestrians that they're not just on a pavement, they are on a path and that there could be people cycling down it as well. Another design feature I like are the regular and prominent shared space signs, which help avoid disputes between people who may not realise it's a shared path, which does sometimes happen on other routes. Of course, it is our responsibility when we're riding a bike on a shared path like this to watch out for pedestrians, so don't ride too quickly and make sure you give everybody plenty of space when you pass them. Of course, separated cycle lanes are better than shared paths pretty much always, but given the space constraints there, I think that's a pretty good solution to getting a safe piece of cycle infrastructure down Whipps Cross Road. If you were looking for some really high quality cycle infrastructure, then look no further than here at the Whipps Cross Junction. This used to be an incredibly inhospitable junction for cycling, but it's been completely rebuilt by Waltham Forest Council and they've done a fantastic job. Separate crossings for pedestrians and cycles, really wide paths for cycling separate from the pavement, blended junctions with the side roads like the one we just went over, and great connections to surrounding infrastructure heading off in all directions. The only thing that confuses me a little bit is this junction here, which is signalised in this direction but strangely not in the other direction. I couldn't quite work out what to do when taking this route southbound. But yeah, the rebuild of that junction and the fantastic cycle path up Woodford New Road that we're on now is really, really good stuff. One place you do need to be careful though is here, where front gardens have been converted to parking spaces, as those cars could pull out at any second. Keep an eye on the pavement parked car here and you'll see that that silver Mercedes, which was completely invisible to the last second, was actually pulling out from behind it. If I'd been a second later there, or that driver had been a little bit less attentive, that could have been really nasty, and it's a really good example of why it's illegal to park on the pavement in Greater London and why it is so dangerous. Now, the UK is absolutely full of fast-moving, narrow A roads like this one, the A104 that we're on now. If you've ever travelled around this country, particularly outside London, you'll recognise this scene exactly. There are so many roads that look like this. The difference is that this one has got an amazing protected cycle track running next to it along the whole way. And that's what I really like about this street, because it really shows the potential for roads like this across the whole country. If you go back on Google Street View to 2018, you can see that this was partly fitted in by narrowing the general traffic lanes, which is a great way to do it in my opinion. Now, unfortunately, this good track is coming to an end and we need to cross the road here. This is the worst point in the whole route, and you really just need to wait for a gap in the traffic and then cycle over to the shared pavement on the other side. I hope that Waltham Forest has got plans to redo this junction, because it really isn't ideal. For now, it is something that you can get through if you know the right way to do it, which you will, because you'll now have watched this video. First, you want to continue along the shared pavement until you're past the traffic lights. And for bus fans, I'd just like to point out that there are 2 Superloop 2 buses in shot just here. Keep going until the pavement runs out and then dive into this path here, which leads to an underpass. This is a pretty similar setup to the one that we went through at the Green Man interchange, just not quite as well connected up and not quite as nice either. I mean, I do like trees and woodland, but in this case, I think it makes it feel a little bit more isolated, although there is street lighting there, so if you're doing it at night, it should be reasonably well lit. You then do more or less the same thing again. There are basically 2 loops connected by that bridge which we just went on, and you have to once again go through the underpass and loop around, which will lead you back onto Woodford New Road. Again, there are street lights here, but it is a bit out of the way, so do take that into account when you plan your route. At the top of the ramp and back on the main road, the excellent protected cycle lanes begin again, this time in a with flow format. So in this direction, you're on this side of the road, and in the other direction, you're on the other side. This does mean that if you're doing the route in the opposite direction, you'll need to take a slightly different one through the underpass, as you'll approach it from a different side. It is fairly intuitive though, as the layout is symmetrical. Now, you could use this parallel zebra crossing to turn into Chelmsford Road with priority, but in this video I've decided I want to go into Derby Road. Unfortunately, there is no crossing into Derby Road, so I waited for a gap in the traffic and then cycled over. You can use the protected cycle track on the other side of the road to double back slightly and get to the filter. One benefit of using Derby Road is that it is closed at this end, so it's very quiet as there's no through traffic. You might run into some cars at the eastern end though, as there is the entrance to a large car park which attracts motorists and generates traffic, so the far end down here could be a little bit busier when you come down here, although as you can see it's not a problem for us today. Derby Road takes us right down onto the parade of shops on High Road, Woodford Green. I'm going to dismount from my bike here and just walk along the pavement to show you past the Tesco Express and where all the shops are. This is very much the edge of London, and some people here do seem to think that they are in Essex. One of the signs there does actually say WEPS, which stands for West Essex Property Services. We are very near West Essex, but I think we are still just about in London for now. Thank you so much for watching that, guys. Do remember that you can download a digital map of the route and use it on whatever app or device you want in a link in the description below the video. Thanks again to everyone who supports us on the Patreon. You can contribute there as well if you like. There's a link in the description below the video. And do let me know in the comments what you think of the video. I'm always interested in feedback, suggestions, or even complaints, although please do be nice when you make them. Do leave a like on YouTube to help other people find the video, and if you haven't yet hit subscribe, then now is the time to do so. I will see you all again next time and in the comments below. Goodbye.